So we say knowledge is power, and it is, and that's literally what we do as a community college, is provide knowledge to increase people's power and their capacity and their social mobility.
Hello everyone, this is Melissa Vela Williamson, your Vice President of Social Responsibility for PRSA San Antonio. Thank you for watching our fourth episode of the Smart Talk series. Today we have a very special guest. Our guest is Kristi Wyatt. Kristi is the Associate Vice Chancellor for Alamo Colleges District, and she has over 20 years of communications, journalism, and public sector experience. Thank you for joining us, Kristi.
Thank you for having me, Melissa. I'm really glad to be here.
Wonderful. Well, I like to start off every conversation with offering our guests a chance to share a little bit about their background and backstory. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
So as you mentioned, I serve as the Associate Vice Chancellor for Communication at the Alamo Colleges District, which for us is like a Chief Communication Officer position. So I manage communication for the district, and I collaborate with the strategic marketing and communication teams at each of our 5 colleges so that we have consistency across our communication and our brand for our district. So that's where I am now. My past experience, I worked for about 10 years in city government as a communication director, both in San Marcos, just down the road, and then in the city of League City, which is a suburb outside of Houston. And before that, I worked in television news as a producer and also as a reporter in various markets.
Well, that's great. Your background and being able to kind of go with the flow and work with the fluidity of the environment is probably of huge benefit to the colleges right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my experience in city government working with disasters particularly has been a really good opportunity here with COVID, understanding how to communicate in a crisis situation. Literally all of us are having to learn. And it's, even though we may all have experience, I have experience working in floods and hurricanes and even tech disasters like stolen identities and those kinds of things, but none of us have had to really experience a pandemic at this level. So we're all really learning through this process. But I think some of that experience has been really beneficial as I'm navigating this COVID world.
Absolutely. And so much has really changed. And now, as we're taping this, we're entering our 6th month. I know this will air even later in the year. So in some ways we can't even imagine what changes we'll experience, although I think a lot of us feel like we have our feet underneath us. So what about your world at Alamo Colleges? How did COVID-19 impact Alamo Colleges?
COVID really disrupted everyone's world. And we serve so many different folks and we partner with so many different agencies and organizations that we have seen really the impact of COVID in every way possible. So for our students, having to transition our 65,000 students to remote learning within a span of spring break and an extended spring break week. So in 2 weeks, having to, in the middle of a semester, having to transition all those students to remote learning. For our faculty, we have 5,000 employees, including faculty, who had to transition to working remotely within that span of 2 weeks. And we were able to do so successfully, but it took a lot of teamwork. It took a lot of collaboration. And I think really the power of coming together is something that we've been seeing out of this crisis, both coming together internally within our own work groups and within our own organizations, and then also in partnership with others. So working with the city and the county on the available resources for our students and the people that we serve, working with them on partnerships to help elevate things like working towards decreasing the digital divide and working towards workforce opportunities for those who have been negatively impacted by COVID, working with our partners who are seeking people to fill roles like in healthcare, where that's a high demand right now because of the needs within that industry and sector. So I think it's really created a lot of partnership and innovation. And so while it's a very negative experience, and clearly there are people who are going through very tragic times and having to deal with illness or financial strains, there is also this other side of it where we have been able to come together and we've been able to be creative and innovative in ways that we never were before.
I think that's right on, Kristi. And what I've appreciated about what you all have done is really, in some ways, a lot of organizations are slow to change or slow to move, and you really fast track some of the initiatives you were already working on. So you had a great foundation, but really pulling down any red tape across partnerships or, any obstacles that may have gotten in the way in the past, you're just kind of finding ways through it. So that's kudos to you all on that. It's wonderful. So you mentioned your students, 65,000 of them. That's a lot of people to communicate with, and they come from all different backgrounds and areas of town and interests. In that time, what did your team or you yourself find most important to communicate to the students when the pandemic started?
So I think what was most important to communicate was just that they had support available to them. It was a very uncertain time. It still is very uncertain. What's safe, what's not safe, what can I do, what's available to me. And so I think our message, and it's been our core message, it's really a part of our mission as an organization to ensure that we are empowering our diverse communities for success. And from my standpoint as a communicator, empowering people is communicating with them. So we say knowledge is power, and it is, and that's literally what we do as a community college, is provide knowledge to increase people's power and their capacity, their social mobility. But from my vantage point with my team, we provide that knowledge through the communication channels and tools that we have. And so really communicating to our students that there are people here to support you through every step of the way. So if your challenge is that you're not great at a remote learning environment, then we have tools for you, and I'm able to communicate what those are. Or if your challenge is that you have some financial issues and you're not able to pay, then we have communications to help you reach those goals, or if it's a childcare issue. And so I think for us, it's just been wrapping our arms around our community and communicating to each and every student that there is a path forward and that we're going to be on the journey with them. So we did do a little bit of belt tightening. So in the beginning of COVID, we looked at all of our funds as an organization. We found $10 million. And we used that $10 million to invest back into our students. So students who had outstanding debt of less than $500 during that first semester, that debt was wiped out. Students who were enrolled, we offer them free courses in the summer. We had, through our partnership with some federal dollars that we got in our own institutional dollars, we were able to give students laptops and hotspots, and we were able to give them money for bills that they couldn't pay. And so being able to communicate the wide array of services to students was a challenge, because it was fast-paced and very complex with lots of different regulations and rules, but we were able to really ensure that everyone knew that there was hope, there was a chance for them. And so that was a great experience, and it's ongoing.
That's incredible. Really meeting them at their true needs, I think is such a perfect illustration of being socially responsible. So thank you for that on behalf of our community. That's incredible. And it's not traditional, but it's what's needed. And I can imagine that's truly appreciated by students. So if we're forecasting a little bit into the future and thinking about, and you all do a good job of this naturally planning ahead. So what type of messaging or communication do you find that they need now, as we've been about 6 months into the pandemic, or might need as they get close to a new semester, spring semester?
I think it's a continuation of that. Specifically when you think about disaster communication or crisis communication, it's in the moment. And so even going back to my days of, weathering a flood or a hurricane or an event like that, where everyone rushes in to help you in the very beginning. And so you're, as a victim or a resident in one of those situations, there's FEMA's there and they're sending you information, and you get all of these resources. And then 3 or 4 months down the road, you're still struggling, and those resources and that communication dries up. And so for us, it's to continue to share what is available to students and continue to show them that there are opportunities for them, that there are resources, there are safe havens, there are kickstarts, there are nets to catch them. So just continuing to empower them and to show them that there is a way forward. And so that's what our messaging will continue to be long after all of the federal dollars have been distributed, and long after all of the programs that are just based on COVID resiliency, we're going to still message that.
Very important messaging, that really continuum of evolving what's needed to be said, as the public sentiment and their needs change. So just like you mentioned with the disaster relief, like after the food trucks leave and after the immediate acute help leaves, you know, that's when there can be like another wave of suffering for those who are going through it. So persevering and continuing to, hey, you can still move forward, baby steps all the time. I think that will really resonate with students. Wonderful. So much public relations has to do with not just communicating a polished message, but so much more has to do with the actions you take before the messaging. So what type of actions did Alamo Colleges take? I think you mentioned some of them. Was anything else you missed, that whether it's actions to address new or emerging issues that you want to bring up? Anything new or surprising that came to light?
So we did do, like I mentioned, the $10 million investment in our students, which is called the Keep Learning Plan. That was monumental for us, and it came from a small idea. So I remember we were talking about one particular student who had emailed that I was managing an inbox of coronavirus questions that didn't have a home. And they were saying, I don't have checks and I don't have a credit card and I have this cash and I'd like to pay my tuition. What do I do? And so we talked about drop boxes and things. And so we brought this to finance, and they came back to us and said, we want to do something bigger or bolder. We don't want to put in a drop box. We want students who are having trouble paying to not have to pay. And so that was the birth of this idea of the Keep Learning Plan. And all it took was us saying, you know what, we're not going to hire these vacant positions, and we're not going to do travel. We're not going to have catering. You know, we're going to look for every dollar that we could use to continue to invest in our students. And so that was a part of it. But also we did something similar for our employees. And so while my department's focus has been external communication and communicating to prospective students, you know, and then collaborating with the colleges to communicate to current students, internal communication became so critical. And we really took up that flag and ran with it, because it was very important in this age of remote working, where we're not able to put up posters and flyers and have meetings face-to-face, that we keep our internal communication consistent. And so we developed COVID updates to our employees that went out in the beginning almost daily, and now about weekly, that gives them everything they need to know about what's going on within the organization. And so that was critical for us. Even things like help for employees. So just like we gave help to our students, we created a fund, Families Helping Families, so people could apply if their spouse had been laid off, or if they had a medical need that they couldn't cover. So that was really good. It was a really good exercise in internal communication and the importance of it. And then of course, as everyone else in the world is doing, we're looking at new ways to do old things. So we managed lots of events, and we have been able to transition those to online events. So we typically did a once a month gathering for certain parts of the organization to kind of highlight what's going on. We took those online, and we were able to, instead of fitting 300 people in a room, we've been doing these Alamo Together summits for all of our employees. And we've had on average about 1,500 folks that gather with us once a month, just to get updates from our leadership on what's going on. Sometimes we invite special guests. We've had Senator Cornyn on. We've had experts in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. And it's been a wonderful opportunity. I moderate a Q&A with either our leadership or our special guests. And so our employees have the opportunity to ask these questions that are burning questions, and actually hear from their leader, or hear from these special guests that are highlighted in these programs. So that's been another connector. So we've been looking specifically and really looking at other organizations, whether that's K through 12 or some of our partners like HEB or USAA, who are connecting employees in this remote world. Because we know about Zoom fatigue, and we know about how difficult it can be to create that connection and collaboration when we're apart. And so we're looking at things that we can do to really elevate that.
I think that's great. That's great. So speaking of taking good action in the midst of this pandemic, I think a lot of us were surprised by some of the emerging trends that came across the US. And one that happened, unfortunately, and was coming into San Antonio had been protests and a lot of racial unrest and conversations about that. And I know Alamo Colleges has been very proactive in communicating their stance and taking some good action around that. Is that something you can tell us about?
Yeah, absolutely. We have had a long history of really focusing on this area. And so even if you go back, and I always go back to our mission and our vision, but our mission is empowering our diverse communities for success. And you can't talk about empowering diverse communities if you're not addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion, and access for us, really. If you're not addressing those, we can't effectively do our job or meet our mission. And so we have some practices in place that have helped us to really shape and strengthen who we are as an organization and how we ensure that we're meeting the needs of our community. I would say that we have about 65 or almost 70% of our students are Hispanic. We have probably more than 75% of our students are people of color. And so we are made up of an organization that serves people who have very real fears, very real concerns, very real needs within today's society, and who are very impacted by the things that have happened recently, including the death of George Floyd, and the conversations that are happening globally. And so we take that to heart. And so while we already had a plan in place that addresses policy, we have a policy on student equity that our board adopted. That's really something that can be sort of a pillar to build upon. We include that within our strategic plan. It's also included within each of our college plans and how they engage. So there are groups specifically for African-American students, African-American men. There are groups for men of color and Hispanic serving groups. Each of our colleges is a Hispanic serving institution, by the way. And we also have the unique designation of having St. Philip's College, which is Hispanic serving and the only both Hispanic serving and HBCU in the country. So this is a part of who we are. One of the things that has happened during COVID and during this time period is we've also seen an uprising of emotion, an uprising of discussion and conversation. And so we want to be a part of those conversations. We don't want them to happen around us, but we want to join in. And so we have done a number of things. We've done some summits with our employees where we brought in experts. We've done some summits where we've just had discussions about where we are and who we are as an organization. And I've had the privilege of moderating those, and it's been really insightful to hear firsthand from our employees, because if our employees aren't in a space where they can talk about it, we certainly can't communicate it to our students. So that was very helpful. We have many different teams and task force that are working on different aspects, from how we're hiring, and if our hiring practices reflect diversity, equity, inclusion, to our student performance and looking at data around which student groups are performing and where we need to meet needs. And then we're also looking at programming and discussions and how we celebrate one another and how we celebrate our differences and uniquenesses. So it's been a great time at Alamo. We have committed to our community that we're going to continue down this path. We have been programming things like our convocation was focused on equity, diversity, and inclusion. And we're just going to continue down that path. So it's nothing new for us, but we are certainly charged and recharged to continue to move in that direction. And everyone has the ability and the need to continue on that journey. So it's been great for us. But I also want to mention that monumentally during this time of COVID as well, aside from Black Lives Matter and our focus that Black lives do matter at Alamo Colleges, we also had the Supreme Court decision on our LGBTQ community. And so we were able to highlight that with our community, with our students and our faculty and staff, and discuss that. There's also decisions that came down about that would impact our international students. And so we've been able to put out series of messages that really highlight who we are as an organization and how we support each of the communities that we serve, the Black community, as well as many, many other communities within our organization. So we just want everyone to feel welcome. And we want to also ensure that we are seeing success for each of these individuals, not just one group or another, but that we are able to look at our data and show that every student has an opportunity for success within the Alamo Colleges. And so I've been really blessed to be able to be a part of the communication process around that.
That's fantastic. It really sounds like you're on top of dealing with the COVID response and relief from that, but you're really doing such a good job of embracing the real meaningful conversations that need to happen, and being from the academic institution, you have resources and subject matter experts who can really weigh in and benefit that conversation. And I love your vantage point, Kristi, because you really have that ability to see across the college campuses, the 5 different ones under Alamo Colleges District umbrella, and and kind of tailor the messaging for the students and the kind of faculty and the culture there per campus. But from that vantage point, do you see any patterns, because it really covers most of San Antonio, that would be universal and inspiring to them that might help us as we communicate with other San Antonians?
Yeah, first I'd like to say that we have excellent communicators across our district. So each of our colleges has a strategic communication and marketing team led by directors that just know their organization. They know the culture of each of their individual colleges. They know their students' needs better than I ever could. And so I'm blessed to be able to work with them and really understand what is needed in that space for that time for those students. But globally, I do have the advantage of being able to work with so many different departments. Not just the colleges, and they're very important, but also working with our economic development workforce group, working with the Alamo Promise team that's really elevating opportunities for folks within our community and providing free community college for many of our seniors from specific high schools within San Antonio, and working with our international programs and the partnerships that we have, working with so many different areas within the organization, that I think really the key thing that ties us all together is social and economic mobility for our community. And one of the things that we did a couple of years ago now, almost 2 years ago, is an economic impact study. And we really were able to highlight that our Alamo Colleges is not just a benefit to the student. It is a great benefit to the student. I won't downplay that. It means that each student, once they receive their associate's degree, will make $9,400 a year more than if they didn't have a degree. That's significant. It's about $500,000 in their lifetime. And so that's amazing in itself. And I love that I'm able to message that, but it also is a benefit to our community. Societally, we're able to become more competitive in San Antonio. We're able to have a richer workforce. We're able to attract businesses that bring economic advantage to us because we have the skilled workers that people are looking for, whether it's an Amazon or whether it's a tech company. We are producing the folks that they need to hire who have that skill set. So that's another advantage to us as a whole in San Antonio. And I think now more than ever, with layoffs and with COVID and with people working from home and businesses closing, we really do need to provide folks the training in the areas that are high wage and high demand that will get them a career and create social mobility for them and their families. I think it's important to note that here in San Antonio, we are unfortunately designated as one of the most impoverished cities, economically segregated cities in the nation. And that's not something to be proud of. We have so many things to boast about in San Antonio. And so we want to move out of that space. And I think that Alamo Colleges, along with our partners across the city in education, but specifically Alamo Colleges, because of the low cost and all of the opportunities that we offer, can really move the needle in that area. And I want to be a part of it. And I think that it means that it's going to benefit me, it's going to benefit our students, it's going to benefit our local businesses, and in turn is going to benefit every single resident of San Antonio.
Right, and I feel like for quite a while, Alamo Colleges has had a lot of community support from corporate partners and other educational organizations, but more than ever, you really feel that groundswell. And it's a big part of you all being such an active player in helping the community through this pandemic, but having already understood the advantages of pursuing higher education had, and then having a diverse portfolio of educational opportunities as well as industry certificates. I think it's going to be a wonderful growth time for you all as people really, work through different challenges and understand that you remove so many obstacles for them, which is a great segue too in the role that PR professionals in education play. I did want to ask you, I've always felt it was special. I do a lot of champion of education, but you're on the front lines with a lot of your colleagues. So what role do you feel that people in education PR play?
I think it's not unlike the role that many of the rest of folks in PR play. I would say first and foremost, we're a translator of information, specifically in higher ed. I have the privilege of working with some of the smartest people in San Antonio with various degrees and specialties. They are just brilliant, but sometimes that their brilliance needs to be translated into something that folks can understand. So if I'm a mother who dropped out of high school and is now seeking a way to better myself, then I need to be able to understand the message. Also, if I'm, sometimes we have folks, I actually talk to our call center folks. There's one of our coworkers had been reassigned to the call center. It wasn't his regular job, but we've been doing a lot of reassigning and helping out. And he said, in one day, I talked to a 14-year-old who was needing help getting enrolled in dual credit. And I talked to a 70-year-old who was looking to change course of their career because they needed some advanced training. And I talked to a single mother who is middle-aged and was looking to advance herself during the COVID. And so those were a lot of different audiences, and they're not individuals necessarily who have the time or energy to wade through a lot of information. So I think for us, being a translator of information is really critical. I think that we're encouragers. So going back to what we talked about earlier, that one of our goals is to ensure that our students feel like they have a vote of confidence from our community and that they have a wraparound sort of one big welcome from us and the ability to call on us if there is something that they need to help them succeed. And then I think we're also strategizers, specifically from my vantage point as an associate vice chancellor serving on the chancellor's cabinet. And I report directly to him, and we have daily meetings with our leadership team of presidents and vice chancellors. We connect every single day, but the vantage point that I have in being able to work with so many folks in the leadership level in so many departments is I can see, and I think this is something that any good communication professional, specifically at a higher level, should be able to do, is we can see where there are gaps and where there are not connections. And so I think when you're working within your own organization, your own work group, on your own work, you may not realize how your work connects to the next groups or the next departments. And so really looking at it and being involved in those projects where we get a project in maybe from workforce, and we get a project in from Alamo Promise, and we get another project in from one of the colleges, and we're able to lay that out and go, you know what, these people have the same goal and they're reaching the same people. Maybe we can condense this message, or maybe we can connect them together to merge some of the things that they're doing. And so I think being able to be strategic and connect not only people with information, but connect departments and strategies and initiatives so that they make sense for folks is one of the privileges that we have as public relations individuals. And I think it's that helps us to elevate to the next level within our careers.
And I'm going to give you another badge of honor for all the education pros, because what I've always felt like is you are expert crisis communicators and strategists, right? You're always planning ahead, looking at the what ifs, forecasting, but on the spot issues management, you guys are on top of it. And it really takes a special type of person. So kudos for that too. Okay, I'd like to ask everyone on our series, what does social responsibility mean to you?
I would say social responsibility is really our moral imperative to give back and to contribute each in our own individual ways to a better society. And so that's something that I take to heart. My whole career, starting off as a journalist, I got into that business because I wanted to help people. And it's interesting because people don't always like journalists, and they sometimes think that they have, you know, ulterior motives. But really, I got into that industry working in television news because I felt like providing people information that could help them make a decision or that could change their lives is important. And then going forward in that, being able to tell someone's story is so powerful. And so that, I feel, is part of my personal social responsibility. And then evolving in my career in communications, I've always worked in the public sector because I still take that to heart, that for my contribution is ensuring that I'm providing people with information they need that can potentially change their lives or change the course of their lives. And so working in city government, I was able to do that around disaster recovery, around emergency information, and even around just everyday things to help people in their lives. And then in my switch to education, it's just been double. My heart for that has been doubled, and the opportunity for me to continue to do that has been doubled, because really every single message that we're creating, everything we put into a student's hand is something to help them prepare for their future, a better future for them. And so for me, that is what social responsibility is. And I'm privileged to be able to get paid to do that, to get paid to really carry out my passion, and to feel like I'm contributing to society in a positive way.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, I want to say first, I think it's your 75th anniversary at Alamo Colleges District. Is that right?
Absolutely it is, yes.
What a banner year 2020's been, right? Well, and so many achievements, really. And I think just like anything else, education is that, you know, long game, right? And we should be lifelong learners. Everything you all are doing, some things that are new ideas and initiatives, you're planting seed for so much future growth in our community. So congratulations on your 75th anniversary. Thank you for all that you all have done. And thank you, Kristi, for being with us today. We really appreciate all your insights, advice, and lessons that you've learned this year.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Wonderful. And thank you all for joining us today and watching our Smart Talk series, episode 4. We hope that you all are staying well out there and healthy, and we'll see you soon.